Science Uncut, presented by the Volkswagen Foundation.
Dear ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. I'm very grateful to be here and to be part of this symposium. The subject of dual-use research of concern and the containment of biological weapons remains highly relevant and important, particularly in times with many instabilities. Today I want to speak about freedom and responsibility of research, and I will add a few nuances to the arguments and insights brought forward today and yesterday. In doing so, I will present the German Ethics Council opinion on biosecurity, which was released earlier this year. The opinion is a 200-page report. The title is Biosecurity, Freedom and Responsibility of Research, and the English translation is available in the internet. This is a report, and you find a handout of my presentation as well at your table, so no PowerPoints here at this presentation as well. Well, before I come to the contents of the opinion, I would like to briefly introduce the basis and working method of the German Ethics Council, since these may not be familiar to all of you. The German Ethics Council was established in 2007 by an act of parliament as an independent council of experts. The president of the German parliament appoints the 26 members of the council, and the legal duties of the council are informing the public, encouraging discussion in society, and preparing opinions as well as recommendations for political and legislative action. In 2012, the Federal Ministries of Research and of Health tasked the Ethics Council with investigating whether we in Germany are sufficiently prepared with respect to the misuse of research from the biological sciences. And we were able to vote on the final version of the opinion at the end of March 2014. And I want to give away the main result of the opinion in advance. There are still very large gaps which our opinion reveals and which in our view must be closed by the national and European legislator as well as by the international community. By closing these gaps, these actors will meet their legal obligations to sufficiently protect human rights and to be in compliance with the precautionary principle as an ethical standard that governs low probability, high risk scenarios. And this leads me to the main part of my presentation, the essential elements of the opinion of the German Ethics Council. Firstly, with respect to an important concept and limitation, we looked mainly at questions of biosecurity. And biosecurity aims to prevent the intentional misuse of research results. Biosafety aims to prevent accidental release. Biosecurity was our focus, but, and this is very important, we are not stating that there's an absolute dichotomy between the areas of biosecurity and biosafety. Quite to the contrary, means to ensure biosafety can promote more biosecurity and vice versa. So what are the main results of the opinion? First of all, one has to mention that the assessment of the risks is tremendously difficult. However, it seems plausible to differentiate between various agents and fields of research. Besides, we can assume that the more complicated the technology required is, the lower the likelihood that it will be misused by a criminal or terrorist. However, these are only observations at a single point in time, since this technology that is difficult to implement today may be easy to implement tomorrow. So what are the decisive ethical aspects that justify to restrict high-risk research in the life sciences? I cannot explain this in detail, but it seems to be an important result that we have reinforced the precautionary principle as a decisive ethical basis for decisions in the fields of low probability, high risk scenarios. Since the misuse of certain research from the biological sciences could lead to catastrophic damages, measures to reduce the risk have to be taken, although we cannot quantify the risk of misuse. And that was a core of the ethical argumentation. The same result can be derived from legally binding human rights. The fundamental rights of the researchers, and Rüdiger Wolfram told us about it, freedom of research may be restricted in a proportional manner for legitimate aims. And the state must protect the fundamental rights of the individuals and the public. Thus, the legislator is obliged by human rights to lay down rules to minimize risk for protected goods, such as health and such as the health of the public or the environment. And this duty is given to every state that is party to the European Convention of Human Rights or the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, like, for instance, the UK, Germany, and the US. We also considered other rules of international law, especially the Bioweapons and Chemical Weapons Conventions. And they are important treaties, but in the area of research regulation, they have many lacunae, especially the Bioweapons Convention. It does not contain a verification regime and is not a treaty specifically dealing with questions of dual use. And the same is true for the Cartagena Protocol to the Convention on Biological Diversity. The protocol aims to ensure biosafety and includes only very few rules about the illegal cross-border transfer of certain agents if they are modified living organisms. Besides, parties of the protocol are inter alia the European Union, UK and Germany, but not the US. So, furthermore, looking at the applicable legal regulations in Germany and Europe were crucial for our opinion. We showed that the existing legal rules in Germany and in Europe that govern research in life sciences are neither sufficient nor coherent. They either encompass only limited areas of biosecurity or they target special questions of biosafety, like the German genetic engineering law. And this can be shown since, according to EU law, a publication in the area of biosecurity relevant research only needs a permit from the export authorities if it will appear in a journal that is not published in the EU. You discussed this morning. And even the important area of research funding has not been regulated with respect to biosecurity risks. Within the EU framework programs for research, there are no restrictions for funding this kind of research. So to sum up, there are many gaps in the legal framework at the international, European, and at the national level. And the question is whether these gaps can be filled by codes of conduct for responsible research. And Ulrich Sieber spoke about these. These codes are issued as an instrument of self-responsibility by scientific organizations or by organizations that fund research like the GFG, the German Research Foundation, and Max Planck Society. These codes are important, but they are not sufficient in effectively regulating biosecurity relevant research. So why is this the case? Although the codes of conduct often include important elements of risk minimization, the standards of the codes are so-called, and Receiver said it, ethical standards. They are not directly legally binding. Their enforcement is thus unclear. Moreover, they have a limited number of addressees since they only bind the respective members of the scientific society or organization, but not all researchers in one state, in Europe or worldwide. Besides, these codes of conduct have no democratic legitimacy, or Receiver said this as well. And this is even true for the new Leopoldina DFG Code of Conduct from the summer of 2014, which was issued after the opinion of the German Ethics Council. Hence, the German Ethics Council concludes that the legal rules as well as codes of conduct that cover important areas of biosafety and biosecurity do exist, but that until now there's no coherent system of rules and other measures that aims to prevent the risk of misuse of biosecurity relevant research. So where to go from here? Our recommendations for future regulation. Our recommendations focus on 5 different levels, and it will be this kind of merger between private standard setting and legislative action Professor Sieber talked about as well. So 5 different levels. The first aims to raise the level of awareness for questions of biosecurity in the scientific community. The second level targets the elaboration of a national biosecurity code of conduct. The third level concerns important questions in research funding. The fourth level displays recommendations for legal rules in Germany. And the fifth names European and international initiatives. From this order, it, however, cannot be concluded that certain recommendations are more important than others. All recommendations do intertwine. Biosecurity is a problem that can neither be solved by self-regulation only, nor on a national level. So the first recommendation targets the raising of awareness in the scientific community itself. The idea is to promote a culture of responsibility and improve the knowledge of researchers in the life sciences with respect to biosecurity. And therefore, questions of biosecurity should be integrated into undergraduate and graduate curricula, as well as into the training and continuing education of life scientists and laboratory personnel. Secondly, the Council recommends the elaboration of a national biosecurity code of conduct that defines the responsible manner of dealing with problems of biosecurity, and therefore I absolutely agree with Ulrich Sieber. The Council generally views such a code of conduct as a useful instrument for the scientific community to enhance and promote self-responsibility. In the code, standards that extend beyond the legal obligation should be established. With respect to the normative principle that the code of conduct should include, I will mention a few important points. Concrete obligations to minimize risk should be enshrined. Research programs should be examined in order to establish whether the benefits are sufficient to justify taking the risk involved. And here it's of particular importance for the researcher to examine whether the research carries unreasonably high risk for protected goods, such as the health of the people as well as the environment. Should such an examination reveal that the risk is not justifiable, then the research should not be pursued. Generally, the same applies with respect to the publication and research cooperation programs. And all of this was consensually accepted by the members of the Ethics Council. According to a group of members to which I belong, the Code of Conduct should also contain an additional burden of justification for certain research programs. This should be the case for those experiments for which it is foreseeable that the pathogenic effect of a microorganism will be enhanced in such a manner that the danger of an epidemic of a severe disease for humans is given. So not all gain-of-function experiments, special gain-of-function experiments where the danger of an epidemic of a severe disease for humans is given. According to our view, such programs should generally not be undertaken unless a direct, concrete, and overwhelming benefit for the protection of humans against dangers to life or health is probable. The reason for the special burden of justification for certain so-called gain-of-function experiments is that these experiments, in contrast to other fields of research in the biological sciences, create new risk for public health. So these assessment and risk minimization obligations are the cornerstones of our recommendations for a national code of conduct for biosecurity, and they are quite equivalent what is laid down in the DFG Leopoldina Codex. I'm moving to the third recommendation, which concerns the area of research funding. With respect to the funding of dual-use research of concern, it should be ensured that the scientist entrusted with project management has agreed to comply with the new code of conduct. Research programs that are not justifiable in the above sense should not be funded. However, and this is very important, whether this is the case in the area of dual-use research of concern cannot be decided by the researcher or the funding party, but should previously be assessed by a so-called dual-use research of concern commission, a DIRC commission, which has to be established for this purpose. And this new commission shall take consultative votes to DIRC-relevant experiments in Germany, and the votes shall be decisive for the research funding. This DIRC commission is an important part of the fourth recommendation, and here the recommendations for new legislation which the Council advocates are summarized. We not only recommend the legal establishment of a DIRC commission, we also recommend to lay down a legal obligation of researchers to consult the DIRC commission before conducting DIRC. dual-use research of concern. The Commission must, in the Council's view, be an interdisciplinary commission that should include life sciences and security experts, as well as biosecurity expertise from the civil society. And the consultation by the Commission should again refer to the criteria for risk minimization mentioned earlier. And so this is a proposal as well which combines the self-regulation or self-governance and legal regulation. Furthermore, the DIRC Commission shall consult on further measures for reducing risk, shall monitor DIRC experiments, and evaluate research cooperations and the publications of DIRC outcomes. It's essential that these legally binding regulations are only proposed for dual-use research of concern. And this is a very crucial limitation. The Council does not recommend the legally binding regulations of all biosecurity relevant research. This shall be encompassed by the Code of Conduct, but instead only of dual-use research of concern. And dual-use research of concern shall be designed as research that has significant potential to give rise to knowledge, products, or technologies which could be directly misapplied as weapons of mass destruction. But since only dual-use research of concern should be legally regulated, a more precise definition is necessary in the Council's view. In our recommendation 4.1, you find it at page 184, the English translation of the report. 10 groups of research experiments are listed which, considering the international discussion, fall within the area of dual-use research of concern. For instance, work intended to enhance the harmful consequences of listed agents, but only 1 out of 10. But, and this is important too, these experiments are dual-use research of concern if and only if they are done with certain dangerous agents. Hence, the Council recommends for the legal regulation of dual-use research of concern a combination approach. The DIRC Code definition, 10 groups of experiments included in a Rechtsverordnung, a statutory ordinance, and third, a list of agents. And for the list of agents, the Council refers in the annex to existing lists, see at page 190, and thus to the current status of the international discussion. It was absolutely clear, and it was absolutely consensus, that the list has to be kept up to date in accordance with the new knowledge in the life sciences, and therefore the list shall not be part of the legislation, but be agreed upon by the DIRC Commission so that it can be changed and modified if necessary. Combination approach. Well, saying this, I want to stress as well that it would be a misconception to assume that the freedom of research is disproportionately restricted if legal regulations besides a code of conduct are laid down. Codes and legal regulation complement each other. Codes of conduct can be useful instruments of self-regulation, self-governance, but in the area of dual use of research, that is in the area of research that carries especially high risks, the Parliament as legislator must decide how to balance the fundamental rights in order to guarantee the democratic legitimation of the rules. So legal regulations are not denying the freedom of research, but on the contrary, it's an acknowledgement of the significance of the affected fundamental rights, the freedom of research and the duty to protect the health of the population. And these are the 4 essential recommendations for the domestic area. First, raising the awareness. Second, a biosecurity code of conduct. Third, special rules for research funding. And fourth, the legal establishment of a DIRC commission and of a DIRC consultation procedure. The 5th recommendation of the Ethics Council refers to European and other international initiatives. Even though the recommendation is the last one, this does not mean that it's less important. Rather, there was consensus that uniform standards on a European or international level are generally the most appropriate for solving the biosecurity and biosafety problems connected to research in the life sciences. For the European and international area, the following is recommended. First, the discussion within the scientific community concerning the possible benefits and risk of dual use of research should continue to be pursued in order to reach a consensus on what constitutes responsible research. One should also try to agree on a biosecurity code of conduct on a European or perhaps even on an international level. On the European level, states should advocate that research funding only proceed according to the previously mentioned criteria and that uniform standards are established for dual-use research of concern in the member states. And furthermore, states should strive for an internationally binding definition and classification of dual-use research of concern, including uniform laboratory safety classifications. It's not convincing for security and safety, and if in one country certain high-risk gain-of-function experiments can be performed in laboratories with safety classifications 2 or 3, but in other countries they can only be performed in the few laboratories with safety classification 4. And that this kind of soft harmonization is possible in the area of biosafety. Relevant research can be seen in the food and mouth disease regulation at the EU level. Lastly, the Council sees lacuna in the current international treaty regime. International treaty law does not regulate in a sufficient way the research-specific dual-use biosecurity questions. The bioweapons and chemical weapons conventions are important, but they have many gaps, as I said, and do not contain coherent regulations to minimize the risk of misuse of peaceful research. Here, states should strive for the conclusion of a special treaty that defines the fundamental principles and limitations of biosecurity-relevant research, or, as a first step, at least at an international soft law declaration. And a very good example, I think, for a quickly negotiated soft law declaration which is relevant to research is the UNESCO Universal Declaration on Bioethics and Human Rights from 2005, which consists 28 articles. It's shorter than the DFG Leopoldina Code of Conduct and connects bioethical principles to international human rights. It was negotiated during 15 months. And this leads me to the conclusion. The goal of the Ethics Council recommendation was to propose a coherent system for reasonable standards of biosecurity relevant research that is open to future developments and balances the freedom and responsibility of research. There neither may be disproportional limits to research nor shall possibilities for risk minimization be neglected. It's certainly difficult to assess the prospects of success of our recommendation, but I think it's fair to say that we are on the right path. There's a critical mass of interested actors from the scientific community and the political arena, and surely we will need some patience to draft meaningful national, European, and international codes of conducts and regulations, but I'm quite positive that we have got it. Thank you very much.